Welcome to another edition of Fanlight Zone Presents. I am your host. My name is Rich. Of course, I'm the executive producer here at Fanlight Zone. I am also a comic reviewer and featured editor for fanlightzone.com. And oh, do we have a great guest and a great book to talk about here. It is a book that is literally near and dear to my heart because for most people watching this know that I host 607 TWS, the wrestling show, and talk pro wrestling every week right here on Fanlight Zone's YouTube channel. And guess what? When you get to take comics and wrestling and you get to smush them together, that is where I love it the most. And listen, I'm going to oversell this a little bit just because I'm through the moon about this book, because this is one of the books that myself and Ken M championed because it is such a great book back when it was on Comixology, which you can still find it there. But the reason we have our guest today is because now you can find it via print, via a Blaze, and it's amazing. And you need to go support Hardstyle Juice any way you can. But my guest is going to be able to talk about that a lot better than I am, because you might know his work from Batman White Knight Presents Red Hood. You might know him from Redline or Poser. But most importantly for this show, you know him from Hardstyle Juice. It is the one and only Clay McCormack. Clay, what is going on?
Not much. I mean, I feel like I don't really have to do much after that intro. I feel like you've talked the book up better than I could. So, yeah.
Listen, I don't think that's possible, but I will say this. Going back, I'm going to share. I want to share something a little personal. Get a little personal here for a second.
Oh, please.
Couple years ago, when we've had you on a couple times with Ricardo talking about Hardstyle Juice, and then it was probably about 2 years now. We were at a Comixology breakfast for New York Comic Con. I was there as press. You were there, of course, showing off the book and such. And during these breakfasts, they used to have like a bunch of announcements and stuff. And that is where the announcement originally went down that Ablaze would be putting out a Hardstyle Juice in print. And I just remember looking across the room to you and like giving you like this, and you just giving me a symbol back. And it was just kind of like one of those moments where you're just like super excited and stoked for somebody, just because, like I said, I love this book. It mixes my two favorite things, comics and wrestling. Obviously, that's near and dear to you as well. And listen, before we get too far off track, how did the story come to be about?
Well, first of all, I want to thank you guys for championing the book, because doing books like this, original graphic novels or whatnot, it's always the hardest part is getting eyes on them, and you're always wondering whether or not it's going to go over. And you guys were really instrumental in getting the word out. So I want to say thank you for that. The original story. So Ricardo and I are both wrestling fans. We're friends, and we had been wanting to do a wrestling related comic for a long time. And I just couldn't come up with the story. Like nothing was kind of, because, wrestling stories tend to be either based on a real wrestler and road stories and biographies or whatnot, or they tend to be really depressing. And I wanted to do and they're depressing, and they get into they're mostly about stuff that isn't wrestling. The wrestling ends up becoming kind of a background element. And if we were going to do a wrestling book, I really wanted the wrestling to be front and center. Ricardo just happened to send me this drawing that he had done of this female deathmatch wrestler with like a luchador mask on, and she had like tacks sticking out of her and a busted kendo stick over her shoulder. And for whatever reason, as soon as he sent me that, just looking at that picture, the entire story just like jumped into my head. And I texted him back very quickly. I was like, okay, what if it's a female deathmatch wrestler? She's from a wrestling family, and her brother gets killed. And it just like all kind of just flew out. And so we did some concept stuff and wrote up a pitch for it. And it was a number of years after that we actually got the book up and running, which always... they say that publishing is a very slow business, which it is, but it feels slow for you, especially when you're seeing how other things come out. And so like we had this thing that we wanted to do, but in the interim, some other wrestling books had come out, and we kind of thought we were like maybe a little ahead of the curve because there weren't really that many wrestling books. And so, Do a Power Bomb comes out, and we're like, oh, gee, okay, now somebody beat us to the punch. And so, then a couple other books came out, um, but thankfully, I think our story was different enough and unique enough that it never made us lose faith in it. And so, yeah, we pitched it to Comixology, and they liked it, and they were nice enough to help us bring it to life.
Yeah, and it is definitely a little different than everything else that's going on out there. You know what I mean? Like, nothing against it, because obviously I love Daniel Warren Johnson's Do a Power Bomb.
Sure.
Michael Kingston is a friend of the show, and he's done a wonderful job in all of the endeavors. But like, reading this and going into the world of deathmatch wrestling specifically, which is a very niche audience to begin with, but also making it very colorful with the luchador aspect. Like, that was like really where I think that it shines, because that's kind of the meeting there, because comics and pro wrestling kind of go hand in hand. You're kind of
Oh,
dealing
totally.
with
Yeah.
the same things, in my opinion. I've always said that it's kind of the same, the good guy versus the bad guy, the superhero versus the supervillain. And so, what do you think, in your opinion, why do you think that those two worlds haven't come together more often? Because really, until lately, we haven't seen as much of a melding of the two words, except for like little throwaway things in this issue or that issue. But like you said, coming into this, Do a Power Bomb coming out, Hardstyle Juice coming out, and like some other books, like that was really when it went. Why do you think it took so long?
That's a really good question. I mean, I think the truth is there have always been wrestling comics, but they've never been at the front of the store, so to speak. Um, like, if you go back, you can find independently published stuff in the 90s, and who could forget the Rob Liefeld produced Ultimate Warrior comic that came out, that I was personally very excited to read until I actually read it. But I think it kind of lives or dies by the creative team, and not only that, but how prevalent wrestling is in the culture at the moment. And I think that wrestling is kind of on the upswing. Specifically, I think the more off the beaten path stuff is kind of on the upswing. And honestly, the before I kind of had that breakthrough with the story, what had really got me into wanting to do a wrestling story is that I had about, I guess it's about probably 10, 11 years ago now, gotten back into watching wrestling. I watched it as a kid, but I fell off of it, as we all do. And when I came back to it, it was right as the indie scene was really cresting. And so you're starting to see like guys like Bryan Danielson show up in WWE, and Kevin Owens, and NXT starting to blow up. And I started going to these independent shows. And the thing I was taking away that was most fascinating to me about it was, as a kid, you're there for the spectacle, and you're there for the larger than life clash of good and evil, et cetera, et cetera. But as an adult, especially as someone who works in an industry like comics, I started to get really interested in the culture, as far as the culture of the people who do this for a living, because I felt that there was a lot of parallels to between wrestling and being a comics creator. Because when I went to these independent shows, they do an intermission about halfway through, and it basically turns into a mini convention, where all of the wrestlers have all their stuff up at their tables, and they're selling pictures and everything. And I just kind of keyed into this aspect of their life, where it's like they're traveling around on their own dime to get their work in front of audiences, and hopefully sell some stuff that can then help get them to the next event that they're going to. And so that kind of element really appealed to me. And also, it's something, it has its own language, and it has its own set of customs and stuff. And I found all that really interesting. And my approach to it was, I was thinking about it kind of like Twin Peaks, in that Twin Peaks is a story that on its face is a murder mystery, but the murder mystery is really there to act as an avenue into this world with very specific characters and very specific culture and stuff like that. And that's where the juice is the people and the community and the environment. The murder is kind of the dressing, and that was my approach to this that I wanted to take that I thought would be a little bit different.
And I think you nailed it completely, because like you're speaking like right to my heart, because about 2004 is when I entered and started working in the pro wrestling business.
Oh,
in
yeah,
the
that's
back.
right. I forgot. Yeah, you used to
So,
work. Yeah, or do you still do? Do you still do?
no, I don't
No.
anymore. But you know, but here's the thing, that was right in that thing. So like when you're
Yeah.
talking there and talking about intermission and about, you know, mini conventions, that's what they are. Like we had intermission just so fans could meet wrestlers, take photos with
Mhm.
wrestlers could sell their gimmicks. And that's like, and I think that's really important, that you don't always see shown places. You don't even always see that shown on documentaries or on, you know, the shows. Like right now, I was going to use the pun. It's unreal to see something like WWE Unreal, where they're peeling back the curtain a little bit. Although I will say I was very jealous of their gorilla position, because ours never looked like that. It was just usually a table, a monitor, and a couple steel chairs.
Yeah,
But whatever.
the
You know, not
WWE
fancy, right?
WWE Gorilla looks like CENTCOM on like a aircraft carrier or something. It's crazy.
And I was so jealous. The first time I saw that, I was super jealous. But that's a whole other side story. Let's not get off too track. But like, no, honestly, I think that's what drew me the most to Hardstyle Juices, because you get to see that atmosphere. And then there's a really good story outside of the wrestling and all the action that's going on. At the end of the day, like you said, there is this, you know, murder, but it really comes together because the bond between Ray and Mona. And what was it that made you make that stand out? Like, why was that such an important thing to get across?
I wanted there to be a really strong familial aspect to the story. Not only, I mean, not only because wrestling it's such a small community. Maybe, you know, it's a lot bigger than it used to be, but for so long, pro wrestling was made up of a lot of families. You know, it's a family business until you sell it for $1 billion. And I wanted to make sure that came through, because these are wrestlers, but they're also people. And the relationship between Mona and Ray, the brother and sister there, I thought was a really important linchpin, because it's just the three of them. It's Mona, it's Ray, and it's their father, King Castro. And when you take one of those elements out, you know, the whole castle starts to crumble a bit. And it gave me an excuse to use the wrestling as almost as a therapy for Mona, to deal with her issues and stuff. And so I think when you do a murder mystery, or you do something like this, I always feel like the who done it is the least important part. And I think if that's the only thing on the table, then it's not really going to resonate. But if you can get people on the side of the main character and really identify with them emotionally, I feel like that's the emotional closure is always more satisfying than the narrative closure, so to speak.
Oh yeah, and once again, nailed it 110%. And I love, like I said, I just love that family dynamic, because it's a very, like you said, it's very real, and like getting into the really backstory of pro wrestling. And I mean, and everybody kind of knows that, whether it's, you know, obviously, you know, we can poke fun and have a little bit of fun with the fact that, you know, Cody Rhodes theme music opens with "Wrestling has more than one royal family." And it's true though. Like, it's funny. Like, I like that he has it in there, but it is true. Like, you think about the dynasties, and especially in Lucha. So like
Oh, sure.
you
Yeah,
choosing
absolutely.
Lucha is
Yeah.
amazing, because like we know about certain families. You know about, like, obviously the Mysterios come to mind right away, because obviously that's, you know, top levels, you know, obviously what Dom's doing now, what Ray did before, and even then going back into Mexico, and, you know, Ray Senior and everybody else. Uh, you get into all that, but then you have like La Parca, which most people don't realize is, you know, we're on, you know, a third or fourth generation of that family, and you just are
Yeah.
passing it down, and that mask gets passed down. And sometimes you have the junior in front of it, and then the junior goes away. You know, like
It's
we'd have Blue Demon, and then he become Blue
yeah.
Demon Junior. Now it's back to just Blue Demon because he's been in that role so long. But
My
yeah, it's
favorite naming convention in Lucha is when they really kind of start stacking up, and so you have like son of Dr. Wagner Jr. or something like that, where you know, it's one of those things where the further you get, you kind of forget where this stuff comes from. Like Penta
Mhm,
was originally Pentagon Jr., who
mhm.
was a secondary version of another character called Pentagon, you know, and it's that kind of thing where the family trees here get very complex very quickly.
Yeah, the newest one, like, well, it's not new because it's been happening forever, but the El Hijo stuff is really good
Yes.
because
Yep.
everybody is the son of, or
Hmm.
you know, or now the daughter of. So
Oh
it's
yeah.
kind of
Yeah.
gotten we're now getting into it, and that's why I said, and this book
It's
really
turning
does
into like
encapsulate that.
medieval naming conventions where you're like, I am El Santo, son of El Santo.
Oh, absolutely. And we could, you know, when you go further and further down, and like there's so many, like it surprises a lot of people. I think even wrestling fans get surprised if they don't know like a lot about lucha, how many of the wrestlers that they then start seeing on their TVs when they hit, you know, AEW or WWE that are actually third or fourth generation wrestlers.
Sure.
Like it's
Yeah.
crazy to think about how many people are, you know, because even look at somebody like Andrade El Idolo, throwing him out there. He's not a first generation wrestler. You know, he's a second generation wrestler, and he's got a big following. It's in obviously doing very well right now in AEW, throwing it out to him. But this book has kind of like a familiar thing as well, because obviously the artist on the book is Ricardo Lopez Ortiz, who is obviously a friend of yours, and you collaborating on this. And why, you know, like I usually would ask the question of like, why was he the perfect artist? But I kind of already know that. So I just want to dive in, and like when you guys were going back and forth,
Hmm.
how much were you feeding off of each other? How much was it kind of like give or take, the like the behind the scenes, like, you know, you would mention something, would he up it, and then you had to come back and up it again and kind of just keep it going back and forth?
It was pretty smooth, you know. It was he kind of knew what I was looking for right away. And there was a couple instances where, and you know, I as a I'm an artist myself, and as a writer, I always appreciate working with other artists because 9 times out of 10, what they draw ends up being better than what I it was going to look like if I did. So that's always, it makes me look great, which I'm very happy about. He gave so much life to so many of these characters, like King Castro being this, you know, literally larger than life kind of character, where you know, if you look at you look at his costuming, you can see that he presents himself as very rich and, you know, of money, but it's frayed in certain parts, and it belies the fact that he's a working dad and all that kind of stuff. And then there were some things where the villain, let's say de facto villain of the story, Jack Renault, I envisioned him as like a Vince McMahon type, you know, older, had a history with the father, King Castro. And it was Ricardo who said, well, what if we make him like a young guy, kind of more like a Tony Khan type? And I was like, you know, I hadn't considered that, but that's really interesting. And so, you know, we just went with that, and I thought it worked really well. And there were some characters where, yeah, there's actually one character he came up with that we didn't actually use, that if we get a chance to do another volume, I really want to use, who was an old hardened Joshi wrestler who ends up training the main character, Chris Castro. So hopefully we'll get to do that if we get to do more. But it was a shame we didn't get to use it because I really liked it, really liked his design.
Oh, I definitely want more. So listen, we'll take a minute here to say, run out. Make sure you get the trade paperback of Volume One. Let's get this. Let's put it in the
Yeah.
world, because we need Volume Two. Trust me. After you read the story, I'm just saying, if you are a comic fan, you are a wrestling fan. If you're both, like I am, oh, you're going to be in heaven. This is going to be the book for you for sure. And I don't feel like I'm overselling that at all. I will gleefully in the comments tell everybody why this is so great. But um after, you know, it seems like you said your love for wrestling came back in after going to the indies. So now let's fast forward. After writing this book, after
Mhm.
like putting this book out in the world, we're a couple years later. Not from the time you actually started writing, but from when it came out and really was completed.
Sure.
But how did that change your opinion on pro wrestling now? Like, how do you look at the world of pro wrestling now that you've done this like kind of in-depth look into pro wrestling?
That's a really good question. I think with everything, when you get that deep into it, you kind of have to take a step back a little bit. And I think once the book came out, I think I did that a little bit where, one of the last books I did was something I wrote and published, I wrote and illustrated myself called Bloody Hell, which was a World War One graphic novel. And I had spent so much time researching World War One. A certain movie or something would come out and they're like, "Oh, you're gonna watch that?" I was like, "Man, I can't. It's just I'm out of the trenches and I need a minute before I get back into it." I will say that my sabbatical from wrestling was a lot shorter than my sabbatical from trench warfare, because there's always something new and interesting that brings me back. I think maybe the thing that's changed is I'm drawn a lot more to the up and coming wrestlers, I think, than I am the established stars now. For instance, I find myself watching the women's stuff a lot more because I think they're fantastic. Across every company, they're just doing really great stuff, and they're getting the spotlight in a way that that the men have had for literally 100 years, and they are grabbing the bull by both the horns and just getting everything they can out of it. It's really fun to see. I was saying to my wife, around the time, I think it was when Becky Lynch left when she was pregnant. I said, "Wow, it's really interesting. We've basically watched her entire career." And I feel like with wrestling, especially before the internet, they would just come and they would just disappear, and then that was the last you'd see. I was always a huge Ultimate Warrior fan. One day, the Ultimate Warrior just wasn't there anymore, and I kept watching, hoping he was going to show up. And I didn't realize that he held up Vince McMahon for $100,000, and they fired his ass or whatever. But and then one day they come back, and it's like, oh, that's great, and then he's gone again. But now it's like you can really lock in and follow someone's career, and so it's been really fun to see some of these younger wrestlers, because I like the I would say the indie guys who kind of came up through NXT and the founders of AEW, they were already kind of established by the time I started watching it. So being able to see some of the people who come after them go through the different systems and see what they do and where they end up has been really fun.
That is so cool to hear because like once again, putting myself in this and what makes me happy about it is I had a front row seat to a lot of like people moving up. Like you got to
Mhm.
remember coming in 04 and doing stuff like your Sami Zayn's. He was a little different then, by the way. Just give people can look it up. Your Kevin Steen / now Kevin Owens,
Mhm.
Tyler Black, who's Seth Rollins, et cetera, et cetera. The list goes on. Those guys, Brian Danielson, big one. Those guys were and girls, because I got to see Mercedes Moné before she
Oh,
was
did you?
there, and then of course, yeah,
Nice.
Sarah Del Rey before she was down now training everybody down
Mhm. Mhm.
as the assistant head trainer of the PC for WWE as a whole, and etc. I could list names forever, but I got to see them in the front row seat. But I understood why other people didn't, because you had to
Yeah.
go out, and even though people were going to the shows and there was a boom in the indies, you still had to go out and buy DVDs, or you had to go out and go to the show and get the DVD, or you had to go. It still was kind of almost like it was DVDs instead of tapes, but I'm still using it. It
Mhm.
was still kind of the tape trader system. Like your friend would have a DVD, you would borrow it, you would burn it, you would whatever. And now with streaming, you can
Mm.
watch so much indie wrestling that's
Oh,
by the
yeah.
time they hit AEW or WWE, they're a known commodity. I mean, great, like a perfect example is Danhausen.
Oh,
Danhausen
yeah, absolutely.
ate that character. I remember the first time. I mean, I remember seeing him when he was still wrestling in tights and no face paint. And so then creating the character was a little more horror based. Then that went into the Pee Wee Herman tequila dance. And that's what really got noticed at first, if you remember, to then going on to AEW, now into WWE, where he's just a money making machine.
Yeah.
Let's be honest. And once again, amazing person. So I'm so happy that that's happening for him. But like, you could watch his whole career, like you said, and now fans get to see that. And it felt like it was almost a sheltered few, because then you're home, like you're home fed for the indies, like wherever
Yeah.
it was, whether you know, in my case, I worked for Squared Circle Wrestling, so 2CW, but then I would also go to CZW shows, and I would also go
Mhm.
to like, so like you would have your home fed, so you would get to see guys and girls there, but then you didn't get to see them elsewhere as much unless you bought DVDs off of like high spots, right? Now you are able to just like YouTube, and it's
Yeah.
amazing. And now with my AEW and my AEW adding more and more indie promotions, it's been fantastic. So I really like hearing that, because it just shows how healthy the business is. And once again, when hearing somebody come in here, and I also understand your break, because when I left the wrestling business, I can tell you right now, I didn't even watch wrestling. Mind you, I'm a lifelong fan, watched my whole life. I took about a year and a half off of watching. The first show I saw coming back is I took my son to an NXT show when the first
Mm.
time they went on tour outside of Florida. It was in Albany,
Oh,
New
excellent.
York.
Excellent.
And so
Yeah.
I took my son up there. It's about 2 hours from where we live. So I took my son up there to watch. And it was funny because I kind of got tickets from an old friend who was wrestling on the show. I won't put it over, but and it was one of those things where it's like, oh, it's about time to dip your toe. And I ran into a bunch of people, because we travel all over the state of New York with 2CW. So I ran into a bunch of people like, I haven't seen you in so long, and da 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 da. And it was nice. And then all of a sudden, back in the fold,
Yeah.
off to the races again. You know what I
Yeah.
mean?
I
So to
I
speak.
will
So
say also, you know, when I was working on the book and I was researching the book, I was just devouring everything. You know, um I was watching, I was going to shows, I was watching AEW, I'm watching WWF, or excuse me, WWE. I was watching New Japan. I had a subscription to what's this? It's a streaming app. It's an awesome streaming app. It's called like PW something, or anyway, it's like it's basically
yeah, I know trouble.
it's like an aggregate for all the indie shows, so I could watch like Progress coming out of England, and these other Beyond Wrestling and stuff like that. And I think, and when I was done with the book and I kind of took a break, I've noticed that my watching habits now are much more streamlined. Like, I when I was really deep into it, I wasn't really watching Monday Night Raw and stuff like that, because I'm like more interested in the smaller promotions and stuff. Now I'm like, I fast forward through Monday Night Raw, because anybody who watches that with commercials is some sort of psychopath. I don't know how it's possible to do it. And NXT, and those are the only two things that I'm really watching like on the day. And it's, you know, I'm still dipping in on other things. Like I watched the most recent AEW pay-per-view that was on the last weekend, which was great, but I'm not watching that weekly quite as much. And so, you know, you kind of got to find your groove to what kind of scratches the itch. And I still love going to the indie shows when they're around there. We used to have this place. It was a brewer. It was the cannery for a brewery that was, I would say, maybe a 10-minute drive from my house, that would put on a show every other month by a local group called Focus Pro Wrestling. They're really great. They're out of Massachusetts. And it was such a great space, because it was a big room, and you could fit a lot of people, but it wasn't cramped. And every other month there was just, you know, for $20 you go see a great wrestling show and get a beer, or a fantastic beer, craft beer or whatever. And then that place closed, and they had to move south of Boston, so it's like hard to get to. And you know, it's when it's right there at your fingertips, it's you get greedy for it, you know.
Oh, absolutely. I understand that completely. And yeah, I'm the same way. I actually, it's funny what you say about watching commercials. I don't watch the commercials on Raw, only because that's usually when I'm working on like comic reviews and stuff, because it's Monday. So
Sure.
like it's on in the background, and then I just like, as like it's a good time to like writing breaks, and then I look
Yeah.
up and I'm like, okay, do I want to watch this? Okay, go back. Like it kind of works out for me.
Yeah.
But
Well,
outside of that, I definitely agree.
I'll tell you, one of the great things about going to an indie show is that it's just so much more personal and so much more intimate, which is one of the things I really wanted to get across in the book as well, because I've been to a number of WWE pay-per-views, and it's just not. You don't feel like you're watching a wrestling show. You feel like you're in the audience for a television show, which, I mean, yeah, it's what it is. I mean, it's kind of what it is. But, like, you know, you're just sitting there doing nothing while they're running their promo packages and everything, and then there'll be a match for a few minutes, and then it's like 15 minutes of other crap when it's just commercials and blah 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 blah. And it's just, when you get to these smaller shows where some of them don't even have chairs and you can just stand up against the ring, and you're close enough that when these guys hit the turnbuckles, you can see the whole ring shake. It really adds a much more visceral, much more tactile feel to the whole thing, which is one of the reasons why I think the people who are fans of this stuff are so passionate about it, because though it is scripted, though it is not quote unquote real fighting, there's a reality to what's going on. And that's the kind of thing that I wanted to get into the book as well, because this is it, the fighting might not be real, but the pain is, you know, and the lives are real, and then they get affected by what's going on.
Like I said, I can't put this over enough from like personal life experiences. That's one of the things that I loved about the book too, because, and I'm also a champion of the indie scene. Obviously, I worked in the independent wrestling scene, so I'm a huge champion of that scene. And by the way, go support your local indie wrestling if you are a wrestling fan,
Yeah.
or even if you're not. If you ever want to just have a good time, and it's usually never expensive, go find the nearest wrestling company that's throwing a show. Even if it's not your thing, I guarantee you're going to have a great time.
It's honestly, it's one of my favorite things to do, to take a friend who's not into wrestling to a live wrestling show, because again, it's so much different when you're right there. You know, there's a certain level of, like, it's almost like watching a magic trick, where there's a certain level of sleight of hand going on, which I think helps. Part of why the ring ropes help so much. There's just enough obfuscation of your visual to what's going on that really helps the suspension of disbelief with everything. And so being right there and being a part of it is so much different than if you're just watching it on TV.
Absolutely. And people are there just having a great time. Like, you're
oh yeah,
and you're gonna see some fun characters. You're gonna see some people who might not be like, you know, like they're not ready to be stars tomorrow because they're just starting out and stuff like that. And it's fun, and everybody has a good time with it. And like I said, I've never had a bad experience. I'm sure there is some out there. I've never personally had a bad experience at an indie show. But speaking of independence, you are in the indie scene of comics, and I'm also a champion of that as well. I guess there's something about indies. I love the indies all the way across, right? And but right now, I got to be honest, and I think that you'll agree with this. It's 2026, and I think that the indies are booming. There's a lot of great things. There's every genre you can imagine going on right now, whether, you know, it's horror, which is huge in comics, or true crime, or comedy, or, you know, there's rom-coms, regular romances, you name it, you're going to find it in comics right now. As somebody who is a creator in that independent realm, what's the pulse for you? How do you feel about the indie scene right now in comics in 2026?
I feel pretty good about it. You know, I'm always, anytime I go to a convention, I'm always surprised. This is going to sound really insulting, but I'm always surprised at how much good stuff that I've never seen before I end up coming across. Because everybody's got their own stories to tell and their own takes on things. And it's, if you've got a good story and you can tell it well, it's always going to be worth reading. The book I'm working on now, the colorist is actually also a writer. His name's Oliver Mertz, and he's got a book coming out called, I want to make sure I get this right, I believe it's a ghost arm made of angry ghosts. And I'm like, I don't know what this is about, but I want to read it because that is a hell of a title. Or maybe it's an angry ghost arm. It's something about it. Google those combination of words, you'll find out. And he sent me a copy of it, and I was like, man, this is a great book. This is really good. And I was at Fan Expo Denver, and someone came up to my table and was talking and showed me the comic that he was working on, that he was the writer for, that he was going to kickstart. And I was like, man, I'll tell you, you're ahead of the game here, because you've got a great artist. He found an Italian artist that does really nice work, and it was like, this is pro level work, man. People are out there and they're getting it done.
And I love it. And you know what? Titles always get me too, because as I look through, like, peek behind the curtain, I've talked about this on this show and other shows before. As we are looking at what we're going to review, there's times where I'm like, oh, I'm reviewing that book because of the title. Most famously, and I happen to have Fred Kennedy on the show before, but Florida Hippopotamus Cocaine Massacre. Yeah, like, when else are you going to be able to talk about the book? And then I had to talk to the creator. So it's always those fun things. And I'm pleasantly surprised, like right now, they finished up is Ted okay. And that's a wild title, but it's an amazing book if you haven't read it. So like, I'm so inundated, and I guess that it kind of like in a way of wrestling, I'm so inundated in comics. Sometimes I'm like, well, people, you should look at this and look at that. I don't think everybody can read everything in a day, but like, there's something for everybody. And I love that right now.
Yeah.
Like there's nobody can say, I mean, trust me, as you can see behind me, I love Absolute Batman as well. But I also, I love all the indie books I pick up, and you can, some other time we'll have to have my wife on to complain about my Kickstarter bills. Just throwing it out there. But speaking of bills and books that I have purchased, I have purchased the physical copy of the trade paperback for
thank you.
Hardstyle Juice. And I kind of want to know, like, going back into that in the process, it came out. I've, obviously on Comixology, digital platform. I know that some people have strong feelings about reading digital. I've always said I've gotten so used to it because of reviewing comics, because most of the comics I get are PDF form. We do Hardstyle comics as well. But just from your standpoint, as the creator of the book, how the presentation, when you got the physical copy in your hand, already having the digital copy, how did you feel about it? What's the biggest differences in the presentation, likes and dislikes, just as the physical book as well?
Well, working with Comixology, it was my first time doing a purely digital first release, and the actual process of making the book wasn't any different. But once the book was done, the first thing that came to my mind was, I don't know how to get people to buy this, because you can't hand a digital book to somebody at a convention. And I've always had the best success at conventions selling my books when I get a chance to, talk to the people and tell them what the book's about, and they can hold it in their hands, and then they'll go, oh yeah, great. So I'm like, well, what the hell am I going to do here? And so what I ended up doing was making postcards and putting QR codes on the back, and just handing those out to everybody I could. Be like, I'd tell them about the book. I would have some of the artwork there, and then I would say, take this, use the QR code. It'll take you right to hardstylejuice.com, where you can buy the book, which you still can, actually. It goes directly to the Amazon page now. I was like, this is fine, but it's not the same as having the book in your hands, and I've always been more of a book person than a digital person. And it's just, I think it's having it there to show people, to talk about, and to let them walk away from your table at a show with it it's just a really satisfying experience.
Oh, I agree. I'm also a big fan of the physical copy. Like I've often talked about that. Like there's books that I review that I still buy the physical copy and read it. Mind you, I've already read it once. But the whole thing is, I like the act of actually flipping the pages. I like the act of the page turn, because that's really hard to mimic. I mean, Neon Ichiban's doing a great job with it, but it's still hard to get the exact flip of a page and the surprise you get when you flip it over and it's done right and the book's laid out perfectly. And honestly, that's kind of what I miss.
The biggest hurdle we had as far as actually making the book was when we started doing it. When I was writing the first script, I had at least one double page spread in there, and my editor was like, honestly, probably not the best way to go, because they don't read, they're tough to do digitally. And I was like, yeah, that's a good point. So if you go through the book, you'll notice I don't think there are any double page spreads in there, because they just don't translate as well into digital as they do in a hard copy.
No, you're absolutely right, because the spreads are the hardest to read when you're looking at a PDF. Trust me, from somebody who has to do it all the time, because you have to go back between the two just to get everything in there.
I really would love a black and white version of this, because one of the reasons I loved Ricardo's artwork for this, I love it in general, but one of the reasons I loved it for this was because he has a very manga influenced style. And I thought that was a perfect fit because his action is so big and so energetic. It makes the movie look like the poster, if that makes sense, you know?
Mhm, mhm. Yeah.
Because you've got these larger than life wrestlers, but fight scenes in comics can be stiff. And so how do you get across this sort of spectacle and pageantry? And his artwork just absolutely knocks it out of the park. And Heather Moore's coloring that she added to did it. It's just like the combination is fantastic. But there's an element that I thought was missing. Well, not missing, but I really wanted to see a black and white version that read and felt a little bit more like a manga, because I think his artwork lives equally in Western and Eastern comics.
It's funny you mentioned it. It's going to be hard for people at home, and I'm not going to get up to like show up. But if you look straight above my head, the top photo up there, that's a black and white photo. That is actually Ricardo's work. It's a Bakugo, and it's black and white,
Mhm.
and it's phenomenal. So when you were saying all that, all of a sudden, I'm looking at my screen. I can see it above my head, and I'm like, oh, get me that black and white issue.
Yeah.
Get it
Yeah.
to me. That's going to be amazing. If you guys could do that, I will personally be buying at least one copy, because, like I said, I right up there is amazing work, and I can't put it over enough. And the colors look, don't get me wrong, the colors in the book look fantastic.
Oh yeah.
But like knowing what he can do, just like I said with the picture behind my head, oh, absolutely, absolutely.
There
Let's have
was
some fun.
sorry,
Go ahead.
before we do, I just wanted to say there's a story that we want to do maybe sometime in the future that is the backstory of one of the characters and her time in Japan. And I always kind of imagine doing that in black and white and making it really look much more like a manga. Especially since our letterer, when he started on the project, he's like, I've got this I've been wanting to try out this new manga influenced lettering style. Do you think it would be working? I'm like, absolutely. Just lean into it, because I think, it's not quite it's a little bit more than a Western look, and it's a little bit, it all works together really well.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. And once again, everybody go out, buy the trade paperback so we get volume 2. And there you go. You got
Please. Yeah.
there is no, as you heard, no shortage of thoughts on what we could get. But let's have some fun. Let's have some
Sure.
fun here.
Sure.
And we're gonna do some little bit of wrestling fun. Of course, as we record this will be coming out after SummerSlam, but SummerSlam is coming up for WWE. And of course, we're on the road to the big event for AEW, of course, being All In. Now, you can pick either or, you can pick whoever you want. But if we were fantasy booking and we could book Mona on either of those massive cards,
Ooh.
taking on anybody you would want, who would you pick to be her opponent?
So the thing with Mona is that she doesn't have a lot of experience wrestling. Well, let's just say wrestling full stop. She's had a very interesting introduction into the world, where she's a deathmatch wrestler. And so traditional wrestling is something she has to kind of warm up to a bit more. So on the surface, I want to say she'd probably be more at home in AEW. But even so, like I feel like the story there is to put her against someone like Mercedes, or someone who has more experience in actual wrestling, to show her exactly how green she really is, when you can't just pick up a chair and hit somebody or smash a light tube over their head. You actually have to tell a story in the ring. You know, what what is she going to have to learn to do that?
I agree. I would be cool to see like her in there against a straight wrestler, but I would also say my pick, just throwing it out there, would also be AEW. It would be for All In, and this person's dance card is now opened up. I'd love to see her in there against the Toxic Spider Tekla, because
Oh yeah.
once again, you have a talented wrestler, but is
Yeah.
also not afraid to get a little bit of a more hard edge, if you will.
Oh yeah,
So I
Tekla
think
would
that would
beat
be
the shit out of her.
so I think that would be perfect. Now
I
let's flip
feel
this.
like
Sorry.
she would be really good friends with Willow.
Oh yeah.
And would probably not listen to Willow's advice going into a match with Tekla and end up getting her ass beat pretty handily.
I could definitely see that. That'd be a hell of a storyline, by the way. I think we could book. I think I could come up with some booking for that over the next couple weeks, pretty easily, honestly. Let's flip it the other way.
Sure.
So now we're let's say we're doing Hardstyle Juice Volume 2. We're putting that out in the world. We're gonna be, let's get that out in the world. But let's say
Mhm.
we're doing it, and let's say that we can offer you so you can use any licensing of all time. Because I don't want to just stick to people now. I want all time. What wrestler or wrestlers, if you want to get a few in there,
Mhm.
would you put in Hardstyle Juice Volume 2? If you, like I said, contracts be damned, anybody you want, and it could be from anywhere.
See, if Ricardo was here, he could probably give you a better answer because he's much more fluent in the Japanese wrestlers than I am, and I
Yeah.
feel like that's probably the answer. Is like Okada or someone like that. Personally, you know, uh, I would see it as kind of like you have that one scene in a movie where your main character runs into the older guy who kind of has the words of wisdom and just has like one really killer scene. If I was going to do that, I would want to use, I think, Roddy Piper, because I
Ooh.
think he's got he was always someone who was he just clearly knew the business and was really smart about how it worked and how to navigate it. And I feel like if you get to a point in your story where Mona doesn't know what to do, he would be a really good person to have there to kind of point her in the right direction. Also, he's probably the most convincing wrestler I've ever watched because he's the only one I've ever seen who I legitimately thought was insane.
It's true. He very good at what he did. I kind of had the similar thought though when I posing myself with the same question. I was like, oh, I would like to have somebody that they bump into to have like the story. And I because of me being a big mark for it, I was instantly Eddie Guerrero came to mind.
Oh,
Because I was like,
sure.
a tie in
Yeah.
with a luchador, it would be like, like who wouldn't want that advice from Eddie Guerrero? If
Yeah.
we could have that. So I thought that would have been person my pick. But I like
Yeah.
Roddy Piper because Roddy Piper
I
is one of
mean,
my best. Is one of my favorites of all time.
there's always room to have like see what it would look like for George Hackenschmidt to take a Hurricane Rana or something, but
Luthez, throw him
oh
in
yeah.
there, and it gets listen. There's of course dealing with death match wrestling. I could throw in there some names, including Abdullah the Butcher.
Sure.
Let's
Having
go with some legends.
having Mona at her lowest point end up on a bar stool next to Terry Funk would be pretty fun.
Ooh, that would be so good. Listen, sell that book. I'll tell you a story off air. But anyways, let's stay focused here because I got one more fun one for you.
Sure.
Because comics and wrestling, let's do it the other way around. And it's not
Mm.
even about writing. What superhero do you think would make the best pro wrestler?
Oh geez. All of them, I think. I mean, that's what got me into it. I was a kid. When I was a kid, I was into comics, and it was before comic book movies were really a thing. So literally anything that was even vaguely related to comic books, I was all in on. And then when I started watching wrestling, I was like, oh, this is like comic books come to life. But if I were to pick one comic book character who would be a great, well, Spider-Man has the wrestling background that one time. Um, it's tough because their superpowers kind of give them a bit of an upper hand.
Yeah, it is hard
Well,
with the
so
superpowers.
honestly, my personal choice, because I've wanted to do this in a story for a long time, even though someone has already beaten me to the punch, would probably be Bane. I think Bane is the most natural. Take him out of that world, drop him into the wrestling world, and I think that fits pretty seamlessly.
Especially if you think 1980s, the big,
Oh,
oh
of course.
man, he'd have,
Yeah.
he'd have main evented. He would have main evented the Garden with Hogan back in the 1980s. Easy,
Yeah,
easy.
and he would have broken Hogan's legs at the request of somebody, probably.
he would have taken the offer that the Iron Sheik allegedly passed up. Like
Mhm.
just throwing it out there. But
I
at the
can
same
tell you
time,
though, I don't know if Bane would be the best in-ring partner, because I really don't think Bane would job for anybody. And
I was
if
gonna
you,
say
yeah, I don't think so.
he could have been a real life Zeus.
Yeah, it was that.
But-
Oh, is that how it works? It was Zeus in the movie. He didn't.
well,
I
no,
can't.
but that was what they were worried about because they really didn't train him to wrestle, and then he came
Oh,
over to do
sure.
the spots, and it was
Yeah,
kind of hard. So if you notice, he doesn't really job, but it's not exact. It wasn't one of those. It doesn't work for me, brothers. I don't job. It's
sure,
just that
sure.
you would have to get him on the ground and have him actually wrestle. So they kind
Yeah.
of worked around it. Giving him credit though, looked amazing doing so.
You
But
know,
like,
I'll tell you, the last book I was working on, I was really under the time crunch, so I was just, head down. And for background, I booted up Netflix and watched pretty much every WrestleMania I had never seen.
mhm.
So I think I watched 2 through 29. I think I watched like 26 or 27 WrestleManias in like 2 weeks. And the thing that stood out to me so much was in those early ones, man, they just throwing those guys in there and just praying that Mr. T doesn't embarrass himself. It's just it's pretty amazing, the show that they can put on with basically a wing and a prayer and a little bit of improv, and knowing when to fall.
Yeah, and then speaking of the Roddy Piper story, there, if you get into it, Roddy Piper throwing the stool at him was
Yeah,
not something that was not in the script. Roddy Piper threw the stool at him because he's like, I just wanted to piss him off, like do
yeah,
something. It's looking terrible at this point. If he really starts fighting me, that's fine.
yeah.
Like that,
That's
like,
why he's the
Piper.
best.
He's like, so I threw the stool at him.
Mm-hmm.
Hey,
Mm-hmm.
why not? Yeah, exactly. That is why he's the best. All right. So before I let you go, what do you got? What do you got in the pipeline? What do you got in the works that we can be looking forward to that you can talk about? Of course.
The next book that I have coming out is it's called Satanic Panic, which I'm the artist on. It's written by Matt Miner, so it's he and I are the same team that did Poser a handful of years ago. Are back to do back in the horror realm. It's about it's a 1980s story, kind of at the height of the Satanic Panic, about a bunch of kind of misfit metalheads who get blamed for a string of satanic killings, but they know that the thing doing the killings is some sort of monster, and so they basically have to clear their own names and defeat this creature before they get completely overrun by the hyper conservative people who just think they're up to no good. It's I explained it to someone, they're like, oh, so like the West Memphis Three? I'm like, yeah, but if the West Memphis Three, if it was actually a monster that killed everybody. I'm like, oh, okay, that makes sense. And
That sounds so awesome.
I've been working as I've been work just to plug it because it's coming out kind of soon. I've been working as the editor on Sean Murphy's new book coming out with Image called The Last Driver, which
Oh,
is I think it, man, some of the best, some of if not the best art I think he's ever done. It looks incredible. He's doing it sideways, basically long ways. So the double page spreads are the length of 2 comic books, so it's cool. It's like a hyper widescreen kind of thing. It's very cool. It's been a lot of fun to work on.
I'll definitely have to check that out. I did see that in the solicitations, and definitely we'll definitely have to check out the Satanic Panic. That sounds like horror's right up my alley. I mean, with wrestling, with comics, I'm a huge horror guy, so it's kind of always, it's hitting all of my buttons, if you will.
Excellent.
So I definitely, and we'll definitely have to, we'll have to bring you back and we'll talk about it when it's
Oh, please, love to.
because I'd love to talk about that more. But listen, I can't stress this enough. If you are a pro wrestling fan, if you are a comics fan, if you are especially a pro wrestling and comics fan like myself and Clay, make sure you get to go to Amazon, go to whatever, go to hardstylejuice.com, go
Yep.
to go to your local comic shop and ask them to order you the trade paperback for volume 1. And that's right, I'm going to call it volume 1 because we are going to get another volume because We are all going to come together to do this. Volume 1 of Hardstyle Juice. I promise you, you will not regret it. The story is fantastic. The artwork is phenomenal. It is a win across the board. I quite honestly, like I said, I know that I am really like giving it the hard sell, but if you see this and you read it and you don't like it, message me personally and I will tell you that you're wrong in this case. I just want to throw that out there.
Message him. Don't message me. Message him.
Yes. Send the hate mail to me. I will take it because I don't think there's going to be any, because honestly, it speaks for itself. I can't even do it justice, and that is with me putting it over as much as I possibly can. Clay, thank you so much for joining me today. Thank you for talking about the book. Thank you for making the book. As always, like I said, we'll have to have you back for the Satanic Panic as soon as you guys are launching that, as well as anything else. You always have an open door here at Fanlight Zone, and we'll always talk to you about it. But yes, thank you so much for joining me.
No, thank you so much for having me.
Of course.
It's always a pleasure.
Thank you. But the pleasure's all mine, I promise. Make sure you check out everything else we got at fanlightzone.com and, of course, on the Fanlight Zone YouTube channel. But for this edition of Fanlight Zone Presents, I'll bid everybody adieu. See you later.